So I've been at this for about two years and a couple of months, maybe, doing this YouTube channel. Started off with calling it Prepaid Preacher Palmer, and it was kind of fun. Changed it to Watch Your Palmer a while back. This predated, I don't recall if there were any Come Follow Me YouTubers or anything back in the day. I know there were some just awesome YouTube channels, but ones that are similar to this, I don't think they existed, but maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't pay that much attention to it, but it's getting more and more difficult, and I'll get to that in just a minute. I wanted to cover a couple of things in Come Follow Me with Israel, Jacob. There's so many good Come Follow Me's, and we've talked about this, and you all have your favorites, and you know what you like, what you don't like, what you have time for, what you might not have time for. So I don't compete with those geniuses, both men and women that do those channels. And frankly, I'm watching them less and less and just focusing on studying what the scriptures say, not because I don't like them or I don't think they're wonderful. I do. Sometimes I just take a break. I just take a break from them, and for no good reason. I guess I'm just not in the mood. Always in the mood for scriptures, but I come and go with the Come Follow Me. So what I'm going to talk about is probably covered already in those, I would guess. But I'm not going to get into Jacob's journey back up to where Isaac sent his servant to find Isaac a wife. Head back up there, and you find a wife. And we all know the story. And 14 years as a servant to Laban. Yeah, that name Laban always has these kind of weird visuals for us as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because we have our Book of Mormon Laban, and then we have the biblical Laban, and both of them seem kind of like scoundrels a little bit. But must be something about the name. Anyway, one thing I do want to touch on that's mentioned here is Leah, who becomes Jacob's first wife. The youngest son she bears, I think, the last child she bears is Judah. I believe it's the last. There might have been one after that, but at least you had Reuben and Simeon and all that down, but then you have Judah, and this is significant in my opinion, that Judah came from her and not from Rachel. We have, of course, Joseph and Benjamin from Rachel. And this used to be kind of confusing for me because I always thought all the good guys came out of Joseph and Benjamin, particularly Joseph, because, tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh came from Joseph. And but I'm rethinking this now because I think there's significance of where the patriarchs are buried, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and with their wives. And in Hebron, Jacob, or Israel, is buried with Leah. And I think this is significant because she bore Judah. And I know we have the definition of the Abrahamic covenant, and I totally believe in that, priesthood, posterity, property. I get all that. But I also think that is only made possible, those three things are only made possible through Jesus Christ. And so in completing the covenant or the promise, it has to go through Christ. And the example of that is Judah. And so Israel, in a very symbolic way, is buried with Leah, who bore him Judah, who Christ came through his lineage. I really believe that. And Rachel, of course, was buried closer to Bethlehem, which isn't that far from Hebron, but that's where she died, and it was buried there, which also has some really interesting meaning. You know, of all places, you know, Bethlehem, that Rachel's buried. So anyway, that's just a thought of that. Now back to a couple of the key things that we study in these chapters, and that's the dream that Jacob has before he goes to find his bride and waits 14 years. This dream of Jacob's ladder is fascinating. Angels ascending and descending. We're taught by modern revelation and by others that those ladder, the rungs of the ladder, the steps of the ladder are the covenants that we make, and they lead us up to heaven. So what's the descending part of that? And I got thinking about that, and to me, it could mean many things. It could mean revelation coming down. It could mean those that have passed on before us are coming to return to the covenant through the ordinances done in the temple. So we are saving them, and they are saving us up and down. And it also could be the heavenly messengers that came down, restoring priesthood, restoring keys, all that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of meanings, but it all points to covenant Israel and what takes place there. It also reminded me, and I'll just go to the Articles of Faith, because I know I talk about the 10 tribes, but a lot of people will, so let me just quote Article of Faith number 10. We believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the restoration of the 10 tribes. And because it's worded that way, the argument is, by many, is that there are two separate events. One is the gathering, doing what we're doing, missionary work, temple work, that's all gathering. And then the other is the restoration of the 10 tribes. And I got thinking about this dream of Jacob, which incidentally, he puts his head on a stone and as a pillow, and then he anoints that stone. That's significant to me. I'm sure there's been several YouTube channels that talk about this. Not reading any of them or hearing or listening to any of them, my perception of that is that that's symbolic of the head, because that's where your head is on the pillow, the rock, and he anointed that because that's where he received a revelation or a vision, and it's part of the covenant of anointing, and anointing the head or this rock, which has so many cool things. I did a video on that, Everybody Must Get Stoned, and all the significance of stones. And this is one of them. This was one of those stories in that video titled Everybody Must Get Stoned, or something like that. You know, the old Bob Dylan song. But and I'm not saying we all go out and get loaded. I'm saying that stones have had a significant history, religious history in the Book of Mormon, and definitely Old Testament scriptures that we refer to. And you all know many stories, of all kinds of situations where stones have who shall roll away the stone, the 16 stones molten, the lights for the jaredite vessels. We have the seer stones. We have the Urim and Thummim, which was like a spectacle stones. You can go on and on. But anyway, he anoints this stone after this dream. And so going back to this 10 tribes, we believe in the literal gathering of Israel. And as I thought of the rungs of the ladder, gathering, and there is a difference between gathering and restoring. You cannot restore blessings until you gather. So we gather on both sides of the veil, and then we go through the process of restoring the 10 tribes to the covenant. And that's through doing their temple work. So you gather them by genealogy or family history. They're two different things. Doing genealogy and family history, one thing, that's the gathering. And then actually performing ordinances for in their behalf, that's the restoring, in my opinion. So they're not these separate events in the sense of there's one group that we gather, and then there's another group that's going to come to us, that's going to be restored to us, independent of us doing anything. Now, this is, in my opinion, one is the act of gathering information, family history, and all that, or inviting people. If you're doing missionary work, you're inviting people to come unto Christ. You're gathering. But it's not until there are ordinances performed that they are restored. And in my opinion, this is the ladder going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Another interesting question, and somebody smart out there will answer it for me. Why aren't patriarchal blessings important for those that we do work for the dead? I'm not aware that there's a patriarch that designates lineage on those that have passed on. Why? It's a question. I have some thoughts, but I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you on that. They're definitely part of the lost tribes of Israel, and they're definitely being restored to the covenant. And that's the key. They're restored to the covenant. This is all about the covenant. The dream was about the covenant, Jacob's dream. The wrestle that he has with the Lord is about the covenant, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So we have a couple of interesting things. We have Leah being buried with Jacob, in my opinion, because the ultimate puzzle piece or the cornerstone of the covenant is Jesus Christ, and he came through Judah. So that's the union. The woman always decides the covenant, and in this case it was Leah, in my opinion. I could be totally wrong. I mean, obviously Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh have a role, particularly in the latter days, but they went through a time of apostasy too. You read in Isaiah, that Ephraim won't vex Judah anymore, and Judah won't vex Ephraim. They were at odds, and Ephraim really was instrumental in the apostasy of the 10 tribes, the northern kingdom. in aligning with Assyria and all that kind of stuff. So you just have to face the facts. You know, it's like having that, you're doing genealogy and you find out you've got this crazy individual in your past, and you're like, you know, and you got to just accept it. It's awesome. So that's some ideas about the ladder in the dream, and Leah, and the importance of her having Judah and the covenant coming through, and she's the one buried in Hebron with Abraham, Isaac, and their wives, and then Jacob. So I think that's all I wanted to cover on that part of it, of Come Follow Me. It's just interesting. I think it is all significant and has to do with the not only the gathering of the 10 tribes and the restoration. I really believe it, and I think the restoring of the 10 tribes is an event that's started taking place really from the first vision on of Joseph Smith. That's when this started, and it's not a future event that we're waiting for the polar ice caps to melt and, you know, through global warming. And then they're going to come forward, and they've got guys with long beards that are holding their scriptures, leading the way. This is being fulfilled, and there's both a gathering, and that's the gathering of information or inviting people to come into Christ that are still alive, and then once they're gathered, they're restored to the covenant through ordinances in the temple. I really think that's one, and it all came from the reading and Come Follow Me for me. So I thought I'd share that with you. Okay, now a couple of other interesting things. Okay, so I went through the process of monetizing on this channel, and you probably haven't seen many commercials lately or anything. Other than the ones that YouTube requires at the beginning. So I did a little investigation, and there's some other YouTubers out there that do similar things that I do. I get into more controversial things, or things that are up for debate maybe, that others don't. And I know why they don't now. Unless you have an independent advertiser on your channel, if you bring up anything that is different than the mainstream reporting, it's kind of an independent company that you go through that monetizes your channel, independent of YouTube but associated with. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, they have their set of rules. And if you don't go along with the narrative, which I very seldom do, then you don't qualify for being monetized. And I didn't know that. So your video will stay up unless you violate YouTube's. So there's the monetization side of it that will decide whether your channel is worthy of being monetized. And then YouTube has their rules. So basically I could show how to, paint fingernails, or how to work on a car, or a diet exercise program, hiking videos. I could do things like that, and I probably wouldn't have a following because I'm not good at any of those things. But say perhaps I was, then I could be, every video would generate money and all that kind of stuff. If I just stuck to things and Come Follow Me, I could, probably make some money But when I go against the narrative of, say, and I'll just say it because I'm not worried about it anymore. But if I don't go along exactly with the narrative of Ukraine and Russia that we get on the mainstream media, then immediately it triggers the algorithm, not algorithms. It triggers the rules that they have, and the video automatically becomes disqualified from being monetized. I had no idea. It's pretty interesting. So I listen occasionally, to other YouTube channels, and I see that they avoid this, and that's why they avoid it, is because they need it. Now, if you do want to bring it up, like JP Spears and some of these guys that are just amazing and been at it for years and have millions of followers, or at least hundreds of thousands of followers, they get other sponsors because the same thing is happening to them. They would be making a lot of money if it wasn't for these. So it's just another form of censorship. It's another form of censorship. And why? Why? How many news channels have you heard, regular news, that indicate that Zelensky imprisoned his opponent that came in second place in their elections? He imprisoned him. How many news channels have said that Zelensky shut down, I think it's 3, but television stations, news reporting stations that reported anything opposed to what he was doing? He shut them down. So this isn't this wonderful democracy and freedom, and no, it's not. Now look, that's not defending Putin, right? It's just adding a reality to things that's missing. It's like you will not hear anything on the mainstream that's negative about Zelensky, about Ukraine, about anything. Now, I have this cool opportunity to talk to an individual. Of course, everybody has their Ukrainian friend now, and all their ties, and I'm no exception. But I didn't know it. So when we were living in Park City, and I'll try to hurry and do this. When we were living in Park City, our youngest son had a project where if he hiked every peak that surrounds the little, used to be called Parley's Park. Park is like a meadow. That's more of the English term of a meadow, is a park. And that's where you get Parley's Park. And that named after Parley P. Pratt, who kind of settled that area. You also had the Snyder family that settled the Snyderville Basin up there. Those were all Mormon pioneers, Latter-day Saint pioneers who went up there and got the ball rolling, so to speak. So Park, anyway, Park City. That's where the name Park came from. But anyway, so Joseph, our youngest, was climbing or hiking all these peaks. And soon I decided to do some of them. I think we did most of them with him, or part of them. But one, you had to drive up into this kind of private neighborhood to get to the base, to get up. And we trespassed. Not basically, we trespassed into an area we shouldn't have been in. Just for the community there and their guests. So this guy came out and he had a thick Russian accent and was yelling at us. And we explained, and he goes, I'm so sick of that teacher having these students come up here. This is private property. And I said, I know. and I'm sorry. I saw the sign and I did it anyway. You know, just why do the pretend, oh, I had no idea, you know, I didn't do that. And because of that, he said, look, you're honest. He said, why don't you park in my driveway? You're my guest. Go up and do your thing. And, you know, so then after that, a day or two after that, Sue baked some bread and something else, I don't know, jam or something, homemade jam. And we took it to him to give to him, to thank him. And from that point, we became really good friends. And he lived in this just an amazing home and was, you know, thick Russian accent and just an amazing guy. One of the most renowned orthopedic surgeons, invented all kinds of things, had this awesome history of getting out of Russia. I think he went to Jerusalem and then he went to London or he might have gone to London first and then Jerusalem. I can't remember. And then made it to America. And he's a proud American. Really neat guy. Anyway, we became friends over the years, but this was years ago. And it's just been a good friendship. So I called him yesterday and had a 45-minute conversation with him. We talked and talked and talked. And I said, Vlad, what is your opinion on this Ukraine-Russia thing? Oh, Scott, let me tell you. He was born in Kyiv, or we used to say Kiev. I don't know. I hear Kyiv. I don't know how to pronounce it. That's where he was born, and he considers himself Russian. He's 84, and I'm going to make an attempt to go to his home and interview him and do a video on it. So he had some great insights, and they were really similar to, with a lot of added history and wonderful history of Crimea, a great explanation of Odessa. The only reason why I can pronounce that is because of Odessa, Texas, but Odessa, which is, he says, is one of the most beautiful cities and buildings and architecture. And of course, Crimea is the peninsula out there and the Black Sea, and Ukraine is kind of in a southern latitude, so that he says you put anything in the ground, it'll grow. He talked about it, but he gave some great insights. Not excusing Putin for anything. He says he's making a big mistake, but Ukraine should never be part of NATO. So he kind of brings it together, and it was independent of him. I had through my studies and just things that I trust more than the mainstream media. I mean, we know what they gave us for the last 2 years. Lies. And so we just, why would this be any different? But it was fascinating. So, and not like picking a side, but also really, so if you think about it, he born and raised in Kyiv. This is right during, and he's Jewish. And he said what the Ukrainian people did to the Jews at the time that Germany came in from the West, not good. And he ties in George Soros into this. He knows all about him. He knows his Jewish name. He knows how he became part of the SS. And of course, George Soros is backing Zelensky. And there's a lot of reasons why Putin is calling Zelensky a Nazi. And everyone says, oh, that's so ridiculous. He's Jewish. How could you even do that? That's so stupid. Well, there's just some fascinating things here. So I'm hoping to do that. I'm hoping he'd be willing to come on my channel. If I tell him I have 10,000 subscribers, I think he might. So we'll see. Anyway, yeah, so we live in these interesting times where you have to be so careful what you say. Look, I never did this to make money, but I thought, hey, it'd be kind of fun. Well, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because I am not going to. I can be careful in speaking code. That's fine. I can do that to stay on this platform. But it looks like I'm going to have to probably go to another, and you know which one it is, at some point. But I'll let everybody know. And it's not like, look, I understand where I fit in the scheme of things, and I'm not trying to belittle myself or anything, but I get that this channel isn't all that important. It's not that important for come follow me stuff. You guys know every bit as much, if not more than I do. And there's a whole lot of people that know way more than I do, that are already doing channels. I think the little bit that I do add is that there's a few of us that think similar, that want to just know that there's somebody else out there that's a card-carrying Latter-day Saint who doesn't feel exactly the same as all the other people. And I think that's helpful to some, so we don't jump ship just because we don't feel like we're a part of it anymore. I feel like that's maybe one thing I can contribute to, but I don't know. It's really getting strange to find that out, that if you bring up anything concerning, kind of weapons or anything like that, you won't get monetized. If you bring up anything controversial, you won't get monetized. However, you could totally slam, say, Donald Trump, but that's not controversial. That's common knowledge. You'd be fine. You could use the F-bomb. You could talk about other things that aren't, that are disgusting, and you'd be fine because it's part of the narrative. You could bring up BLM. You could bring up in a positive way. You could CRT in a positive way. That's good. But if you go against the normal, what we'd consider the mainstream narrative, if you go against that at all, boom, you're done. As your videos aren't taken down necessarily, but you won't be monetized. So that's where we sit right now. And I won't do that. I will continue to talk about things as I see them. Now, look, I don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, what can I go against today? I don't do that. But if you see this programming and the same narrative over and over and over and over again, as we've seen the last 2 years with you know what, and now we're finding out all these crazy things, and the evidence is overwhelming that we were lied to. Yeah. By the experts, and then the media and everybody else. So why would this be any different? So there you have it. Little update, a little bit of insight scripturally. I can't wait to continue to talk about Jacob and Israel. Of course, the wrestle he had we should probably finish with the wrestle that he had. I personally don't think it was with the Lord. I think it was a physical being, probably an angelic being of some sort. But then that gets into, he had a physical body. So I really don't know how or what this being was. But I don't think it was Jehovah as a spirit being. He did see God, who was probably Jehovah, but it doesn't make it clear that it was the guy he had the wrestling match with. I did a video a while back on this. Is our wrestling matches that we have with the Lord, because Enos, he wrestled not with the Lord, but he wrestled before the Lord. Wrestling with his worthiness and all that in the Book of Mormon is great. But he brings up the word wrestle, similar to Jacob. And I said, are our wrestling matches like the WWE? I think that's what it's called. I used to follow that. I loved it. And it's fake, but there's some element to it. And I brought up a story about on my mission, there was a professional wrestler in Eastern Canada. His name was Sailor White, and he had the white hair, and my companion and I on a P-Day were at the laundromat washing our white shirts, and who should walk in is Sailor White. I about fell over. So naturally, I had to go talk to him. Told him we were missionaries, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and did all that. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I'm washing my uniform." It's this little spandexy thing. This is in the 70s, mid 70s. Well, a little later 70s, 76, probably. Could have been 77, but probably 76. Anyway, we have this great conversation, me and Sailor White. My companion's sitting there, he's like, "What are you doing?" I mean, just freaky looking guy, 70s, right? But awesome and total friendly, nice. And I said, "Okay, tell me what's real, what's not, tell me all about it." And he goes, "Most of it's choreographed, staged, and all that." But he goes, "See this scar here? That was a chair over my head that was supposed to come apart, and it didn't." And, and he was beat up, this guy. So even though, it's fake in that sense, and who wins is all decided and all that kind of stuff. But, there were some real injuries, not that weren't fake, right? But obviously I knew. But I grew up with, Crusher Kowalski and Baron von Roshny or something like that, the Claw, and I love professional wrestling. The Rock, he did it, and who was the other guy? Anyway, it was fun to watch, but it's just kind of raunchy, creepy stuff, and I think, okay, if we're having a wrestle before the Lord or a wrestle with one of his servants, physically having a wrestling match where our hip becomes dislocated, are we doing the WWE fake, or are we real? Are we fake or are we real? And I've always wanted and tried and really want to be real. I don't want to be fake. I don't want to do things for the wrong reason. And that doesn't mean I'm perfect at it, right? I'm not. But that's what I desire, and that's what I try to do. Be real with God, and be real with you, and be real with my family, and real with myself. And by real, that doesn't mean accepting subpar behavior or accomplishment, but it just means to be honest, right? And have a real wrestle, not a, "Hey, I'll do all these cool tricks." Sometimes I think, look, no offense, Relief Society, but sometimes with all the stuff, is that the real, the doilies and the tablecloths and the things that we all make fun of, the ice sculpture with the chainsaw and all that from some of those Mormon movies, and then doing some activity that has nothing to do with covenant keeping, nothing to do with Jesus, worshiping him, worshiping God through him. But there's some good elements to it. But is this WWE stuff? I don't know. It might be something to think about. I'm just bringing it up. Or are our real wrestles that we have for real? Like are we breaking ourselves down or allowing God to break us down so he can build us up into who he wants us to be? Letting him prevail, right? That's what we learned. Letting him prevail in our lives, not necessarily letting him prevail in conquering everything and getting his way, but letting him prevail personally with us. And we'll talk about Peniel. We'll talk about these other things later on. But anyway, that's it. I went too long, but I love you all. I know God loves you. I know he loves me. And I know that there's a real joy in being honest. And I strive for that all the time, to be honest and to not cave in, right, to the pressures out there so that we can fit in. I'm very comfortable not fitting in. Bye.